Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland. Tonight we're going to be talking about artists who misfire. We're going to talk about Paul McCartney, a little bit about Bruce Springsteen, and yes, even hello Dolly. That's right, Dolly Parton still thinks she's a rock star. All right, so for tonight's purposes, when I say an artist has misfired, I'm talking about them releasing an album that is not only a surprise to their fans, but really to the world at large. First up for discussion is probably my favorite all-rounder in rock history, Paul McCartney. Now, Paul McCartney has had a great career. There is no doubt about it. Very few misfires in his canon. Of course, he was with the Beatles, one of the predominant songwriters for the Beatles, and his stint with Wings, some of their fans didn't even care that he came from the Beatles. He was that big in the 70s. And of course, he's shown us several times as a solo artist, he can still knock one right out of the park occasionally. So what am I talking about Paul McCartney misfiring? Well, of course, I'm talking about his release, Kisses on the Bottom, which I think is code for Kiss My Ass. You know, John Lennon once said that Paul McCartney was anything but square. He would dress up square, talk square, but then he'd paint his left ear blue. Of course, that time he was talking about Paul McCartney being barefoot on Abbey Road. He has a bit longer hair there on the cover, but it's basically a Beatle cut, and he's wearing a suit that was closer to being what the Beatles showed up on the Ed Sullivan Show than what the Beatles were currently wearing at that time. Paul has always said the reason he wasn't wearing shoes is it was a hot day that day and he decided to take them off. So his cure for the whole situation was to walk on hot cement on a hot summer day. You see, that wasn't square Paul McCartney. That was McCartney kind of rebelling, and John caught it right away. So when Paul decided to do an album that was all standards, with the exception of a couple he wrote for the album, I think it was an inside joke all along. Now, this album sold well. It was number 3 in the UK and number 5 in the United States, but that had a lot to do with the fact that his previous album had done so well also, and that was because he was connected to Starbucks. You went and paid for your coffee, you saw at the register a Paul McCartney album. A brilliant strategy that worked out very well for him, and it even helped bring Memory Almost Full, perhaps Paul McCartney's last true genius album, to the folks at large. And when you think about Kiss My Ass, I mean Kisses on the Bottom, that was a mom and pop album. What better place to sell a mom and pop album than Starbucks? Starbucks usually right next door or within walking distance of whatever bookstore was in town. But for me, this album wasn't an artistic step forward in any way. I think the material he wrote for the album was average at best. And you know what? It did nothing for rock and roll. So for me, Kisses on the Bottom by Paul McCartney was a complete misfire. Now on to Bruce Springsteen. Now Bruce, just last year, released an album of standards. Here we go again, right? All right. And this year, he's been quoted as saying that he's kind of fallen in love with his voice. He never thought of himself as a really great singer, but after listening to the recordings and the masters of all of these standards that he did, he's decided that actually the man can sing. We always knew that, Bruce. You have a great voice. But what's lacking here? You see, Bruce said that one of the reasons he didn't think he had a great voice as just Bruce Springsteen, singing Bruce Springsteen songs, it was the instrumentation that was of primary importance, and so his voice became an instrument with the band rather than just a lead singer for a band. But you know what? That doesn't get him off the hot seat. And guess what? He's got another standards album. You know, it's interesting. The articles I've read are introducing this as brand new information. He's got a second album out. But you know what? All the interviews he gave at that time, he stated quite clearly he had recorded more than enough material for just one album, and he was already considering putting out a volume 2. So it's not the big news that all of these outlets seem to think that it is. His standards album was competently done. And you're right, Bruce, your voice does sound strong on the album, but guess what? We've already heard these cuts before. And in my opinion, we've already heard the definitive recordings for those songs for the most part. To me, he didn't add anything artistically. He didn't add anything to the Bruce Springsteen catalog other than just songs he might occasionally perform live, taking the place of other tunes I'd much rather hear him sing. Now, the only difference between Kisses on the Bottom and Bruce's standards album is that the songs that Bruce covers are a little bit more updated, taken less from the 50s, early 60s, the 40s, all of that, and primarily taken from the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s. But a misfire nevertheless, as far as I'm concerned. Now, it's interesting, with both of these artists, we have rock artists who have gone over to the standard side, you know, the dark side, and have presented us something, usually because they don't have anything new to offer from their own writing. But the third person we're going to talk about is Dolly Parton. And this is a little bit different. You see, Dolly is a country singer, despite the fact that she seems to think she's a rock star. She's got a brand new album entitled Rock Star. She was knighted by Jan Wienerboy and his minions to be into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And you know what? When she first declined this, I think it was all part of her plan. Because you know why? In such a short period of time, she's releasing an album with 30 songs on it. All right. So first of all, let's talk about the 3 pre-releases. Now, I've already covered the first pre-release, and I said it was a fine song. It's a song that she actually wrote. And the lyrics? Instead of saying, we got to put it to the man and all of those traditional rock and roll tropes, she uses the word politicians, of course. And of course she would, because she's a country star. And country stars in their songs would call politicians. Rock and rollers would call them anything but. Now, she's also pre-released 2 other songs, all right? One with Rob Halford singing a duet with her, the other with Ann Wilson singing a duet with her. And that's just a cover of one of Heart's songs, done much better by Heart. And the only thing interesting in that song is when Ann Wilson is singing. You see, on all 3 of these tracks, all you hear is distortion. And I'm not talking about the kind of distortion you hear in a guitar to give it some rawness and everything. No. They've gone up to their dial-up effects kind of guys, and they've put a distortion on everything. Have you guys noticed that lead vocalists on all hip-hop songs and the rap songs that are really making waves on the airwaves today all have heavy distortion on the lead vocals or the rap that's being presented? Now, Dolly's voice, although wonderful, don't get me wrong here, it's a thin voice. Matter of fact, that thin voice from Dolly cuts right through a mix. There's very little reason to give her any special effects after the fact other than maybe just a touch of delay for the lead vocals. But they've not only distorted her voice, they've ran a distortion filter over the whole damn production. So as longtime viewers could tell all of you, when they do these pre-releases these days and they get to track 3 and it's still bad, that's a strike 3 for me. And this album gets a strike 3 because that's too many cuts on an album to ignore. Even if they pre-release 3 duds and the rest of the album is golden, that's too many duds for me to even be interested in that release. All right, so here's my question for the tribe. I always give one of those, don't I? How many other artists can you guys name, and I want to see this in the comments, artists who have thoroughly misfired on a release for you guys? I can easily think of another dozen more, but I thought these three artists especially hit the point for tonight's video. If you enjoyed tonight's video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. That helps with channel growth. And if you're a viewer who hasn't subscribed to the channel as of yet, that's easy. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, then tap that top bell icon, and you're there. All right, guys, I really want to see those comments, because you know what? It's together that we become the tribe. You and I, we are the tribe. I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line, as I see it only, and I'll see you in my next video.